So moving on to step 2, this covers the front axle and the 2 rear ones. And they look pretty straightforward. The 2 rear ones, they follow the path here, and then they come together with the prop shaft. The problem we have is, on the paper, just the sheer number of parts to deal with each axle. So this is for the front alone, down to the steering knuckles. And then you can see the 2 rear ones, a massive amount of parts to do. So for this, we'll probably have to break into at least 2, possibly 3 parts for step 2. So let's get cracking with the front axle here. So we'll start cutting all the parts up now. You have to be very careful with these D-bolts here, cleaning up. If you remember from part 1, I broke 1 out of the 4. So, okay, we'll get these cleaned up now. I just noticed I actually cut off a part that we don't need at this step. So I've just put it into a little baggie with a label so I don't lose it. So I'm not going to show the cleanup of everything, but a few things I want to point out is this sprue gate. It's very big. You can see it crosses 2 different planes of the part, so on this outside surface, and it's also on the inner glue surface as well. So we need to make sure we take it off, particularly the joining surface. So if we just push the snips on and press them and make sure they're flat against the surface and cut it off. Still left with a little raised bit that we can take off. And then on the outside surface, we do again, just look at this edge here and make sure it's flat. So not like at an angle. But try and get as flat onto that as possible, and then when you cut it, it'll be as close as possible. So this one's almost right on the surface now. So that will be easy to clean up. It's not too bad there. Okay, I want to have a look at how I clean up sprue gates on thin members like these D-bolts here. From part 1, I managed to clean 3 of the 4. But let's have a look. So the first thing is we want to remove as much of the sprue gate as we can. We might do that in a couple of steps. Just because I'm trying to get onto the surface as close as possible. So even that's not looking too bad. You want to minimise as much movement as possible as well in the actual part. Every time it flexes, it chances breaking. Okay. So we'll just hold it in this bag. You could use tweezers. It's got a flat surface area just to grip. And I like to use a really fine, this is 800 grit. You don't want anything that's too rough that's going to catch any sharp edges and bend it. And then we just want to work it. There's no pressure on this. You can see how much it's flexing. There's no stiffness to it. It will take a bit of time. But just keep working away with it. Like I say, I'm not pushing or any force at all. Just letting the paper or the sander just do its thing. This one's not too bad because it's quite stiff up here anyway. It feels very smooth to the finger. Now these are going to be a bit trickier. We want to avoid flexing it. If you see it flexing, then you're pushing too hard. And again, we just let the paper or the sander do its thing. Okay, so that's kind of done. So like I say, this is what works for me 9 times out of 10. You may have different methods, but this kind of works. Okay, so that's all the parts for the front axle done. Let's start assembly now. Okay. So that two notches need to be vertical, I believe. The springs we need to be careful because there is a front and back. You can see that slope there. It needs to go into this way here. Just make sure it's lined up 90 degrees. Okay, so the last thing is the D-bolts. That was barely long enough. Let's try the other side. Just makes it on that side. Let's try this one. Okay, that one fits just, no, not really, it's still a wee bit short. Yeah, that one's, again, just barely getting into the holes in the bottom plate. As you can see, what I'm going to do is I'll let all this set up and then I'll just enlarge or deepen these channels here, or grooves I should say. I'll just deepen that grooves there just to allow the shackle D-bolts to sit down a bit further. Okay, so I've started putting them in. What I had to do was I got some fairly rough paper and just folded it and then just worked it into the groove. So just press it down with my nail. I can get these into the location points. And then we'll just lock it up here. So that's the front axle done. Fairly straightforward. Pretty quick to do. So I've rough cut out most of the parts and put them into their assemblies. There's still a number of parts in the folder. Problem I have is depending on how you assemble it, some parts could be attached to either assembly. I've also laminated all the parts, or most of the parts that require it, but that was covered in part 1, so I didn't show that again. Previously I had translated the instructions, but for this assembly, with the instructions and the fairly busy diagrams, what I did was I broke the instructions into distinct steps just to make it a bit more clear, because it's so messy trying to work off this and block of text. It also allows me to work on individual sections. Some of it you start and you'll have to continue, but I can pre-prepare some of the other parts using the bullet points. Just when I highlight the springs, I almost came unstuck with these because initially I didn't laminate them. And then I noticed the KrAZ, which is laminate to carton, and I almost laminated all of it in one hit. But when you translate the instructions here, it says only to laminate the ones with KrAZ. So in closer inspection, you can see some don't have KrAZ. Or I would have messed up if I laminated the whole thing. What I've had to do is just number them in pencil, right from the largest to the smallest. Because once I start cutting them out and laminating individual ones, I'm going to lose track of them. So that's where we're at with the springs. We'll start with the springs actually, because I want to try something new for myself. So what I'm going to do is, for the parts that we don't laminate, I'm going to cut them to the shape. Because they're so tightly packed together, I don't have much waste on each side. So I'll cut these out to the size, and that gives me a bit of waste for the part that's to be laminated. Okay, so that's the size, and then the adjacent part is now got some waste, so it will aid when we come to glue. Because I need this part here next, I'll cut to that line. And again, it means I've got some waste each side of the part to be laminated. So the front springs, the instructions say, are flat. So I want to try a different glue, because the wood glue and the acrylic medium, due to the moisture, you do get some bending and buckling. Because I want these to be perfectly flat, I'm going to try a solvent-based glue. And I've seen really experienced modelers build a whole kit using transparent Yoo-hoo glue. I've never had luck with it before, never worked for me, but I'm going to try the E6000, which is a similar solvent-based glue. So if I can get this to work, hopefully we'll have zero warpage or bending. So let's give this a try. I did do a small experiment with it in a couple of strips and it appeared to work, so I'm just going to go for it for this. Right, so I've got my glass sheets ready for pressing these down. Apologies for the light, it's just hard to provide enough light to see what I'm doing without getting reflections. So I've just cut out a piece of paper from another model, which is the same thickness as this kit, and then we've got this part we're going to glue up. I've seen people apply the glue and spread it with their finger, but potentially get very messy. It's very hard to get it out this thin nozzle. I have to try and get a better nozzle for this. Okay, so with some dried glue in the nozzle that I'll need to remove. So what I need to do is get a better nozzle so I can get the glue out quickly and evenly. And then I'll just stick it under the weight of the glass and that will hold it down. So that's all the spring parts here cut out or laminated where necessary. Now I actually was getting annoyed trying to squeeze that tube, so I dispensed the E6000 into one of these bottles here, thinking it would be easier to squeeze the glue out, but it still was very tough. I mean, the nozzle size is quite small. So what I ended up doing was just taking this off and then squeezing the glue up and using the toothpick to apply the glue. And it was a lot easier and controlled, and I could get a nice wet film on the complete surface. So I'll keep doing that for the time being until I get a better solution. Okay, quick tip. If you're trying to cut something, it's very narrow. You'll find the ruler sits down at an angle. So all you need to do is just put something on the back edge. It's a similar thickness to what you're cutting. It just keeps the ruler level. Okay. Right, so we have all the leaves of the springs cut out. So we'll join them together now. So leaf 1 and leaf 2, we need to turn this one over because this surface is going to be exposed because we've got additional parts to mount onto here. So we'll turn that one over and then we'll glue the back side of this one. So as mentioned, we'll just apply the glue with a cocktail stick. Now we just need to make sure for this one's we get the ends squared up. So that's the first one done. Afterwards, we can go in and just clean up any excess glue. Of course, it's still going to be stringy at the moment, but it kind of always remains a bit elastic. So once it's all set up, we'll be able to just pull them off. But I'm happy with that now. So that was 1, 2, and now we'll just continue to glue them up. We've got the end here, and there's always the line that the next part goes onto. So the next part will go into that line. And also we've got a center line here. I'll continue making these up and then we can come back. So that's the springs all glued up now. Fairly happy how they turned out. I'll let the glue go off for a while and then I'll just clean up any excess. Like I say, I'll be able to pull it off with tweezers. So we'll continue with the mounting block it sits on top, and that's this part here. I was a bit confused because it looks like there's only like a couple of parts. And then I found this down further in instructions. It shows the assembly. So we'll go on to that now. So some of the parts we laminated previously, quite substantial. So we need to take care that we cut vertically down, which is a lot harder on the thicker card. Okay, so that's not too bad. Maybe off slightly. So I'll go off and we'll free all the parts and then we'll come back for assembly. So that's all the parts cut out for the mounting block. So we'll make up one. We've had to write on the back side, left and right. So we'll make the left one. So the first thing we do is glue these two parts together. So we'll just use wood glue for this. And we'll just use a square, just make sure we're aligned. Okay, so that'll go off. And while we're waiting for that, we'll work on this little block here, and this has to be wrapped around it. So on the surface there's lines printed where the folds would be, so just transfer them onto the back. So I'm just going to push the blade on the line. So I've turned this upside down because I want this to be flush with the top. If this is a bit out of size, it would be better for it to be on the bottom. I'll just glue up one surface at the moment. It's it flush with the top, which is good. And we'll just leave this to go off and then we'll work slowly around it. So we'll just work around. Okay, so it's a wee bit short, but that could be because maybe I trimmed this too short, or the box is maybe a wee bit too big. But I can actually fix that. I could just put a strip in and then trim it. So I'll probably do that. But we'll keep moving forward. Okay, so it's now time to wrap the side piece around the block. There's one thing to note. It tells you in the instructions. You might have got that line there, but we'll have to slice that so we can wrap around this edge here. So I'll use a razor blade to see if I can. Don't have a new sharp blade, that's a problem. Okay, I'm getting a nice sharp blade. So this one is a bit damaged. It does have sharp edges on it, and that's slicing through. Just put some creases in the bend at the right place. Again, there. Okay, so that's not too bad. I'll glue that up now. Double check. This is the one we're working on now. So if I turn it over that way, that should be right. We need to bend that way. Okay, so the last thing to do is just fold this flap over. Just kind of putting some dilute glue down in there because the fibres have separated a wee bit. Okay, so it's not too bad. The last thing to do is glue that top block on. I haven't fixed the gap because, to be honest, I don't think it's going to be seen in its location, so I might just go ahead and fix that. Like I say, I might go back in and not too bad. Now, this would sit on here, in that position there. Okay, so we'll move on to this assembly here, which the instructions refer to as a brake cylinder. Surprisingly, with the Hobby Boss front axle, there's no mention of it. However, the two rear axles do have them. So I've cut out all the parts for that now, and we'll have a look at these parts here. So these have to be folded together and glued, and we've got two of. So I'll show you how I tackle these types of parts. In this case, it's not very important about alignment purely because we're painting. If you was to leave it with the paper colour, you need to make sure the fold was perfect. So I'll show you how I do this. So rather than just folding on the line, what we'll do is we'll put in a couple of cuts right on the edges, and we can do both parts together. Now, there's been a bit of thought put into the printing because they've aligned them together, which is good because we can then do the score through together. And for folding, what I like to do is we just cut through lightly, maybe to about half the thickness of the paper. And that means when we come to fold it, it'll fold on the line a lot easier. And again, because they're together, we can line up a lot easier than if you were just trying to score the one edge, because the slightest ruler movement will amplify the angle. So we can do both together. So remember, we don't want to cut all the way through. Okay, so we can now just separate them and deal with them individually. So when we do come to fold, we align this edge with that edge. And that would be enough normally, or this one as well. So if you align these and together, you know they're perfectly aligned front and back. Because you've got two datum points, you could actually just cut this right through and just square up the two edges. But we'll try it this way first. I'm trying to remember what the edge is on there. I want to ensure our edges together and the two ends are together. We are able to slide a wee bit into our line, so that's that edges together and that edges are together. So now they should be perfectly aligned front and back. So while we're waiting for that part to set up, I'll show you my preferred method for cutting out circles. And that can be done or used for any size circle you want, even small ones like this. But we'll just separate the parts and then we'll just remove a lot of the excess. This makes it a bit easier to work the part. So what I like to do is use the blade in a slicing motion. You just come down and then you can work your way around, taking slivers. Off the part like that. Smaller, thinner the slice, the smoother, rounder it's going to be. It's quite hard to get in close because of the camera. I normally work right in the edge of the table. So the knife is working easier because the table's here, so you can access it a bit easier. But it's long and boring to watch, so I'll just show you kind of angle you can get. The other method, and I'll continue with this part, is just using one of my homemade chisels, because it's got a flat edge and the cutting bevel on that side. You can do the same. And I'm not just pushing straight down, I'm actually slicing it by rolling it into it. Once you get a rhythm going, it's not too bad. Okay, so again, don't want to bore you to tears. You can see the continuation using the chisel as opposed to the blade. So we've got a number of parts to do with that method, so I'll do that offline. Before I cut out these small parts, I want to make a hole through the paper for potential future detailing, and it's easier to punch the hole now before it gets too small and potentially buckles or whatever. So what I've done in the past is drill up the inside of the brass tube to put a sharp edge on the outside. Now this is pointed, this is the smallest I've ever done it, because all my portholes to date have been on like 1.62 mil. I don't know how this is going to work, being so small. So the theory is we're putting a bevel into the tube, or the wall of the tube, and we're leaving a sharp edge on the outside, which hopefully cuts the paper. Like I say, I've never done it this small. We'll get some fine paper just to take off any burrs. So we'll give this a try. The white actually looks like it's a bit bigger. It's almost cut. So what we might be able to do, if the tube was a bit shorter, it might not bend the way it did. So it's almost through on one side, it's just not on the other. we might be able to just work the tube round and round. There we go. It's kind of distorted on the back side, but we can trim that off. So I think what's happened is we can't get a thin, sharp bevel. Hopefully you can see the hole. It certainly works easier in the larger sizes. This is probably a bit too small, but we've got it anyway. Okay, so I've investigated an alternative method. So we still have the 0.8 tube with the bevel, but rather than hammering it, what we can do is use it more like a drill. So gentle pressure, because we don't want to bend or crush the end. And I'm just putting light upward pressure as well on the paper here. There you go. Okay. A lot cleaner. Okay, so for the underside, or the bottom, I can make a hole bigger because we've got a larger area to work with. And this is a 1.6 brass tube that I've used for portholes. So hopefully this will show it a lot better. Okay, so hopefully you can see the bevel. With this one, it doesn't matter so much. We could do a proper punch. It just means the bevel's on the outside, which wouldn't matter in this case. Now the problem is, I think these are laminated, so it's double thickness. So maybe a bit more problematic, but we'll see how we get on. Now just eyeball it to the center. Almost through. And there you see, we're all the way through. So the 1.6 works perfectly. The 0.8 is probably just a bit on the small side. So if I was just doing single paper, I'd probably get 3, 4, 5 holes through single layer. I'll just keep sharpening it. I've only got one more to do. Again, we'll just take off the bar. And then that's it. We'll cut these out. They'll sit on top of a hole right through. So the last piece we need to look at is this strip here, which gets rolled into a cylinder. Now when we cut the ends, if we cut them square, what's going to happen is when you roll the paper, you're going to be left with a gap. So we need to put a slight undercut onto the edge there. It doesn't have to be a great deal. Okay, so that's all the parts cut out and prepared, more or less. So we can now assemble. The first part we're going to look at is this plate here. So you can see there's a white side of it, and that needs to get folded down. So we've got a couple of options. We could just score through there and fold it, or we could remove some material on the back. Because there's bolt detail there, which I'm going to add. Let's just try scoring it and folding. Okay, so we want it to stay 90 degrees, so what I might do is to apply some CA to the joint. And that's kind of held it at 90 degrees. So the next thing is we'll roll these into cylinders. We've also got like a joining panel as well. So what we'll do is we'll use a bit of brass tube just to start rolling them. The diameter is a lot smaller than the finished cylinder, but that's so we can get a tighter roll onto the tube, the cylinder, because it's easier to open a cylinder up than to try and close it against the springiness of the paper. Particularly the edges or the ends tight, so with no flat spots. I'm going to put a bit of a curve into these as well. Again, it's easier to open it up than to close it. In fact, let's see if we can get it a bit tighter. There we go. You can see it's going underneath itself. That's what we want. Okay, so we'll glue this joining piece on. So we'll leave that to go off. Looks a bit worse because the paper's not coloured in the ends. So we'll let that set up and then we can just rework the cylinder a bit better. It's not too bad. We're happy with that. I'm going to try wood glue in this one. It's probably looking a bit nicer with the wood glue bit. Okay, so let's get these back into a cylinder shape. So using a wider, just want to gently roll it, and that should restore the roundness, which isn't too bad. Could slightly flex it. For the top and bottom, we'll straighten these up anyway. So we'll try to fit them first because we don't want, if they're oversized, popping our joints out. Diameter is slightly too big, but we can try it on the bottom side in case there's any. Okay, so we just have to take some material off that disc. Just go through, just go around with your sander and only go in one direction away from the surface, or the exposed surface, just so you don't cause any rolls or damage. And I'm actually doing it at a slight angle as well, and that's to put in a bit of a bevel to make it align a lot better. I'm just going to run with glue just on the inside surface. And there we go. It's looking pretty good. We can do the same for this top one. Okay. The white uncoloured edges kind of make it look a bit rough compared to what it is. But that's okay. We'll leave that to go off now. I'm happy with that. Okay, so we're moving on to the next components. Now we'll attach the cylinder. What we'll do is we'll put the seam against this edge because that will be the least visible place, I think. A bit too far over to one side. Okay, the glue's kind of gripped it already, so we'll just leave it. So what we'll do next is we'll apply the nuts and bolts all the way around. So these are 1mm, slightly smaller would have been better, but okay. So next we'll apply nut and bolt sticking out. Don't know whether you can see that. Okay, so that's the bolts on. So we'll add these discs next. Now the bottom one's got a line on it, and that needs to be parallel with the mounting point. Although it doesn't matter, as long as you attach the next part at right angles, it'll be okay. And then we'll do the top. Okay, so we have another mounting bracket to put on, and these are handed left and right, so we need to make sure we get these correct. So here's it there, and I think this is the left one, which means it goes on, yeah, I'm working upside down, that's why. It goes on this way parallel to that bracket there, onto that, okay. Okay, so that's in parallel. What I'll do is I'll just carefully set this aside so that it remains vertical. So the last part is this strip here, which, as you can see by the arrow and the symbol, needs to be rolled into a cylinder. Trying to roll the normal thickness of the kit paper, it's very difficult, and I don't have any real advice for it. I did do it and I tried it. It's relatively successful, not the best, so what I'm going to do, I won't show that, for you're supposed to sit on the arm circlers, I'm actually just going to cut a bit of rod and use that. I'm surprised I managed to get this one rolled very hard with the standard paper thickness. I'll do that when it's time to attach these to the hubs, because then I can get the correct distance. With that being said, that's the brake cylinders done. Oops, almost forgot, we've got a nut and bolt to glue on the end there. Now we're done. So the next part's the steering hubs. There's nothing different that we've done so far, so what I'll do is I'll just cut out all the parts and then we can come back and have a look. So that's all the parts mostly cut out. So we'll start assembling now. And that's just wood glue. So we've got this axle here, it sits through there, and then we've got the other part on top, which is linked with some, I've just used styrene rod. And what we're doing is we're just checking the alignment. I've got all the holes lined up before we glue the top. And that looks not too bad there. But before we glue the top, we do have another action to do, another step to do. So what we need to do is, the instructions say coat this in CA glue. So we'll do that now. Just when you're using lots of CA, just be mindful of the fumes, because it does make you flu-like symptoms. I can feel my eyes stinging, just being so close to it. So I'll do that first, and then I can come back and do the other side. Trying pretty quick. Okay, so don't want any sitting on the surface, so what I'll do is I'll just wipe that off. Okay, so that was a lot quicker than I thought. So we'll leave this to go for a while. Like I say, just be mindful of the fumes. My eyes are watering. Okay, so that's the arm set up and push through. So we'll glue the two halves together now. Oops, just make sure it's lined up. And then once that's glued, set up, we can push this pin all the way through. Okay, so that's now glued up, and the pin pushed through. We need to glue it onto these parts here. Now, hopefully you can make out the dotted line where it's supposed to sit. However, they seem to be overly long. Well, actually we could probably get away with holding it flush in the center, but we're going to have to knock these corners off to account for the curve. Okay, so I rounded over the edges where necessary, just with a 240 grit. It just worked my way around. So that's better now. Follows the contours. It's not going to interfere with the skin that goes around. Before I glue this down though, we still have a cover to put on this side. So I'll do that now. Okay, so let's glue this up now. Okay, leave that to go off. We can now put the other cover on. And make sure that two edges is parallel. So we've made up both hubs, but I think I found the first error of the kit, and it's to do with the skins here that wrap around. So left and right is if you're sitting in a vehicle looking forward, left, right. And I know this is left because the brake mounting points is a rectangle in a circle, and they're at the front of the axle. So that has to be the left, and similarly the same for the right. So in this diagram here, looking underside, looking forward that way, because that's obviously the drive assembly of the reduction gear, which goes backwards. So if we go in that is left, because that's the top and forward of the axle, top and forward of the axle. So that's right. So the reason I picked this up is, so on the left hand side skin, the center, there's lines on here you may not be able to see. So I've transferred them to the back for folding anyway. So the section in the top center has to be the top. So if we look at this skin here, it's going to be the top surface. Remember, that's looking underneath. So that's the top. So it could sit like that, or it could sit like that. Now, the tie rod arm here, the underside rectangle is at the front, which means that would have to go there. So then when we roll this round the curve, onto the top, around the back curve, onto the underside, the arm's getting thrown to the outside as per that. That can't be. So I'm going to work on that premise that they've got the left and right skins mixed up. I'll just mark up the inside edge and the inside edge for that one. The reason I want to keep an inside edge is the left one's not too bad. I think the right one's a bit misaligned. So what we're going to find is the skin might fit perfectly in some areas, and it might be in or out on others. This hub's buried deep inside the wheel, so potentially you're only going to catch or see this edge here. Inside you'll never see, so it doesn't matter if it's like very too narrow, you're never going to see it. Right, so let's move on and we'll get these folded up. So I put the marks on here. because like we've done for previous folds, we've indented the paper just to help it turn the corner. So top's flat, the underside is in 2/2 is flat. We need to curve these. And this is just to help it form around the bend. So I'm keeping within the fold, the marks. Okay. Don't have to go excessive in these. It's just to help it to take a springiness out. So remember, inside top. That goes like that. Flip it over. Rectangles at the back and the arm is thrown to the inside. Okay, so we'll just glue this up now. We'll just start at the top and then work our way around. Get an idea. So let's glue the top section. I'll leave it how it needs to be orientated. Like I say, we'll align the inside edge here. Let's try to think if I should glue the skin or glue the... I'll glue the skin. Oops. Okay, so that's looking good there. So that's right. Rectangle kick to the inside. Okay, so I'll just let this set up well because I don't want anything popping off. I'll come back for the next step. Okay, so I'll just work my way around them all. So that's the hubs all glued up now. Not the best, there's a few errors, it's compounded. So as you can see, the skins haven't matched or touched. So the lesson learned is to leave excess on the ends so I can adjust for any changes in length. And it's the same for the underside of the other one. Also got some overlap of skin on the end here on this face. So I'm laminating and gluing up. There's some inaccuracies there as well. Like I say, I'm not going to do anything to these. They're going to be buried inside hubs, so none of it will be seen. There's just a few other bits and pieces to put on, which I'll do off camera because there's nothing special there. And then we'll come back and have a final look. So that's them done now. We've got the entire rod arms on the side, and we've got an axle here for the wheel. Okay, so like I say, I'm not going to fix up any of the issues. Luckily for me, they're all hidden inside the wheel, so I'm not going to attach the brake cylinders just yet, which would sit on there, because I've got a feeling I'll need to do some more work on these to get them to fit into the axle, and the brakes will just get in the way, so we can leave that for the time being. Okay, so here's the majority of the parts for the front axle on the reduction gear. It goes to the back of the diff housing. So we'll make a start. I've already cut out the front of the axle, and we can tell because they've got marks for stiffeners there, which we'll put in later. So that's the front, and then we've got the top and bottom. We know this is the top because 125 is the springs. I've actually left them over long because when we start folding and rolling and bending, the ones I've done so far have always fell short. So I've left it over length, and I can cut it to size later. And I'll transfer the lines onto the back because we'll do some folding and bending on this. The front axle and the rear haven't cut out yet. It's pretty straightforward just to cut in all the tabs. So we'll start on this first. I don't really have much experience working with tabs, but we'll give it a go anyway. So we need to cut through partially so we can bend these over without cutting them off. There's a few straight edges which we can just use the ruler. We want to score lightly through. We don't want to cut them off, but we want to have a score line. Probably to this one at a certain point. Possibly that. And then the rest we'll have to do freehand. And then we do the same for the underside. We'll start bending these over shortly. For the top, we've got a long arm and a short arm. So that's the long arm. And then we've got a flat section at the top here, which would be this section here. So I'm just going to put, where I've noted the number, that's a flat section. So I'm just going to put some indentations in to help it get around that bend. Not being overly aggressive in this case because it's fairly gentle. And then here where you can see it goes the other way, I'll just put an indentation on the outside just to help that as well. Okay, so it's going to look something like that. And then just to help this curve here, I'll just put in, I'll eyeball it. That's not too bad, just to take the springiness out of the paper. So let's have a look at these tabs, see if we can bend them over without destroying anything. So we're now in a position to glue this. So that will sit on top like that. Okay, so I'm going to work on a sheet of glass here. So what we do, flip that over. We flip that over as well. Just going to put the ruler on it, give it a nice flat area to press against to hold it down. And we'll just apply some wood glue here. Okay, so that's looking really good. I'm happy with that. I'm just going to leave this to go off for a bit, so it's going to take a bit of time to work our way around. But we'll come back and have a look at the other sections. Okay, so we'll move on and we'll do this short side here. Again, I'm going to press it down onto the glass. Right, I'm just going to go straight off and glue this last bit on this side as well. Yeah, it's pretty good now. You see it's a wee bit open here, but that's because of the tab. I think it's because it's separating a wee bit. See if I can squeeze that down, it closes up. So I think the paper's delaminated a wee bit, but that's good enough. I'm not going to mess about with it because it will just get worse. It's pretty straightforward. I'll just finish this off and then we can come back. So that's the top and bottom glued onto the front axle housing. Got the rear one here we've cut out. Exactly the same method for the rear. These tabs really are annoying. You get them in one side and they pop out the other. Okay, so what I'm thinking is I'll do the same. I'll just glue one section at a time. The flat here, it's probably the best datum to work to. Okay, so what I think I'll do is I'll leave it inside, glue that and then pull it up. And let that set up for quite a bit. And I'll probably do the other side in a similar manner. Actually, let's do that now. Okay, so I'll leave that to edges to go off. I'll just do the rest off camera, but you get the idea. I can do this section here just by pushing that in, same here. And then these two sides look like they're going to go in okay as well. So that's the front axle all glued up. Very happy how it turned out. So we'll continue on the assembly of the parts for this. So this one here really threw me. It took ages to find it because I was expecting 2 cylinders for each end. But we need to wrap this up. So I asked you to roll it over 3 mils. I've got some brass tube here. You can see you start here, as per the arrow, you move forward. Work down, transfer that line onto the back, because that's where we're going to roll. And that way, we can keep the correct orientation by keeping the printed line marked up with the pencil line. If it starts going askew, we'll be able to correct it. So, it's always difficult to get started, I think, rolling, because we want to make sure we get a tight bend. We make sure we follow that line. As you can see, slight gap between the paper and the tube, so we can try and pull that tight. Okay, so I've got it tight, forming a cone which is correct. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put some glue along this edge here. That's just to protect the cutting mat. Okay, now I can just work the brass rod out of there. I'm just going to leave it on there until the glue fully dries and it's nice and stiff. But essentially, it feeds through there, hopefully, and it does. And then you can see we've got the center axle. Okay, that fits onto the end there. So we'll fix this back plate on now, and this is for the reduction gearbox that we'll make next. You have to be careful because we've just got one thickness of paper. You don't want to press too hard in case you crush that under part. I've aligned it with the top, that seems to be the most accurate. The bottom's got a slight rise on this side, but again, you're not going to see any of this. Now we do have this plate here as well, which goes on the front, and that's to support the differential housing bulge here, which is made up of these parts. But I'm not sure if I should glue it to this and then to there, or glue it there and this to that. So let me cut out these and form them up, and then we can come back and see the best way. So when you're rolling cones, or truncated ones in this case, it's fairly straightforward. The problem I have with is this first one though actually has 2 flat spots, top and bottom, to account for the housing here. But typically what you would do is you would hold your rod in the center, so you're really just going from the radius and rolling it. But like I say, because of the 2 flat spots, I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. So okay, so there is a small tab as well that we'll use. I need 3 hands. So we'll let this sit up, and then we can come back in and just fine tune the curve. needs to fit on there. Okay, so because this is a cone, the actual back plate that fits behind it was cut square. So what I'm doing is I'm just going around, taking off that edge there, just so this plate has an angle on it. I don't want to go too far, so I don't want to lose the actual shape, so I don't want to angle it into the back surface. But I can knock off a corner so it's at an angle, and that will account for the slope of that. Okay, so that kind of works. So initially you think that back plate's oversized, but it's actually the right size. So that's actually just held on, just with the shape, and if it's no glue yet. Okay, so I'll just fine tune this a wee bit, and then I'll glue it up. Okay, so that's that glued up now. Not too bad. Some of these edges are getting a bit soft, so I'll have to take a bit of care. I know that's a top because we've got the printed lines for that bracing. You can just see there. Not too bad. It's not as bad as I was expecting it. Of course, we've still got another part to go in here. It's the same process. So I'll go away and do that now. Okay, so I did the second cone off camera. It was very tricky. Bit of damage at the bottom there. Holes through both support discs, so if needed I can get something in to pop them apart if they fall inside each other. To finish this cone, a couple of bits left to do. So we've got the disc there, so we'll do that now. So the last part in this assembly is the oil filler. So I was just going to 3D print it because I thought folding this up might be a bit too much. However, I gave one a try. It didn't turn out too bad, so I'll just use it. So for the reduction gear housing, we need to do the same. So again, I've scored through the tabs. This part here wraps round. So this is about the center here, so it's going to be fairly curved. We can kind of keep it in this area here. And then this flat section on there, another flat section on the other side. So we really need to just focus on the center here. I'm going to go quite hard and get a fair curve into it because it's easier to reopen it than to, as you can see, trying to keep that middle circle. Probably went too far on this side and not enough on the others. Give this a bit more here. That's looking better. And we can open this up relatively easy. Start working these tabs in. These little triangle ones are a bit of a pest really. Don't know what value they're adding. It's been harder to hold this now. And then I've actually scored down these lines as well. Oh, I should have done this line first. I did crush the fibres underneath, but I'm not sure how well that's going to work. Not too bad. I should have scored it anyway. So we're going to pick one edge and we'll do this one first. Okay, we need to be careful we don't crush or distort anything here. Okay, so I think we'll do this other side now. Two edges go off and then we can come back and finish this up. Got a feeling we're going to fall short again. I should really have scored through this line because it's holding it back. Oh, lessons learned again. This whole project's lessons learned. Okay, so what I think I'll do here is I'll just do half and half because I don't want this flat skin to get pushed too far down. I'll just hold that to go off. I really regret not scoring that now. Okay, so we'll do this part now. I'll just hold this for a bit to go off and then I'll finish off. So that's the reduction gear housing kind of made up. I added this white strip there because it fell short. And it fell short because we've lost some distance here. I should have scored that and I would have moved that forward and it would have come all the way around. So we're now ready to continue on with this. There's a couple of plates to go on each side. Of course, I'll hold it to its proper position now, not to the old mark. That one will be forward slightly. And then we've got some plates on the side here, and then we've got extension here. So that's all the parts lined up. Just put it on the ruler so I can get down onto the edge properly, aligned. So you can see how off it is, just in regards to the printed location. I'll do the same for the other side. Okay, with this part here, which extends, we need to roll this. Okay, so we'll give this a roll into shape, into a cylinder. We're going to work on, concentrate on the edges, or the ends, because they do have a tendency to remain flat. I'm going to over roll it so it's tighter than it needs to be. So we need to glue the ends there together. I'm going to use this piece of brass tube, which is just slightly undersized, but that'll help me glue it up. What I've also done is I've polished the brass so it's smooth, so the glue doesn't stick to it so easily. Put a bit of masking tape just to hold it, and as you can see it's not sticking, but I'll leave that to go off. Very happy with the join there. And then we've got this disc that fits in the end. So while we're waiting for this, we've got another cylinder we need to roll, so we'll do that now. Just going to roll it a bit tighter. And same deal, I've got another rod here, slightly smaller than the actual diameter, and again it's polished. And again, just put a bit of tape on just to hold it. Okay, so that's that bit done, and I've inserted the centre part. And we'll glue that on now. Because the mounting point is slightly askew, as you remember, based on when we came to wrap the skin, it's a bit offset. So I've just marked on some tape here to get the proper alignment. And then we have this other cylinder that we rolled, so I've put the caps on top and bottom. Okay, so that's the reduction gear housing. I'm stopping at this point. We should have more assemblies here, and then there's a couple of parts here, and then the universal joint. I'm not going to do that at this stage. Okay, so that's all the sub-assembly is done. The last thing that remains to do is to put it all together now. So we'll start by attaching the differential housing. So we'll attach the reduction gear housing next. I went ahead and applied the 1mm 3D printed nuts. We're now in a position to mount the springs. Need to make sure that they're right angle. So try and use the grid on the mat looking down. Again, we have to be careful not to crush. Just using the file to support the inside so I can press down. The next thing to do is prepare the bottom plate and the D-shackles. So these were bent from 0.8mm brass to the diagram. It's supposed to be 0.7, but this is the closest I had. And on the underside of this plate we've got another part to attach. So we'll do that now. So we attach this to the underside. We need to make sure that it lines up. Actually, what I might do, put the D-bolts through. Okay, so that's probably going to be easier to do, is if we put the D-bolts in place, and then we can put in some glue, and then just let it fall in. And that should be the correct location. Okay, so I'll lift that up. Okay, I think that's pretty good there. So we'll just leave these free at the moment. For the D-shackles, the instructions have you trim them just prior to the mounting plate and leave it at that. However, what I've done, 3D printed up some cap nuts, and we can use these as end treatments. Just to tidy up the end of the brass. So I'll go off and do the same for the other side. The only thing we need to watch for that is make sure the distance this way is correct, but also parallel to that one. So that's the other spring on. It's looking pretty parallel in that. We do have a problem though, where there must be a twist in the actual axle because the springs aren't lining up. So I've tried several methods to try and take a twist out. None of them successful. It doesn't take much to straighten them up. So what I did, I measured up the kit mounting points and then 3D printed them just for speed because the kit ones would take forever. And I just wanted to see the impact of that twist. If you hold down the 3 points here, you can see we've got a dog leg up in the air there. However, it doesn't take much to straighten this up. So I don't think it's going to move the twist from here into the frame because the frame's pretty sturdy and it doesn't take much effort. So I'm pretty confident that I can continue on without worrying about the twist in the axle. So we need to fit the hub drive shaft, I guess, into this axle housing here. So what we'll do, we'll keep this on the brass just to make it easy to hold. And as you can see, it's supposed to slip in there. But what we need to do is knock the corners off this rectangle. The overall width is about 3mm, and that's the internal diameter of that hole. So what I think is we'll just use a fairly rough grit of paper. We'll just slowly work the corner off of this. And we'll just go around all 4 corners. Because if you remember, we soaked this in CA, so it's really quite hard now. We just want to take our time. We want to go too hard too soon, because we want it to be a nice snug fit. Have to watch we don't bang or damage any of the hub components. Okay, let's see how this goes. Okay, a wee bit tight spot there, but it goes in nicely. I'll try and get it back out. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we'll just do the same for the other one on the other side. Now that we've fitted the hubs to the shaft, we can safely install the brake cylinders now. So let's do that. And then we've got a bar there. If you remember, we're supposed to roll it into paper, which I think's overly long. But what we'll do is I'll use this 1.6mm styrene rod, and that should fit in there. Yeah, because that needs to get pushed up anyway. So I'll just put some wood glue on there and there. And if I pull this back, it should be able to slip in there. Okay, so it doesn't line up fully with the white spot, but it looks to be all nice and square anyway. Okay, so we'll do the same for the other one. Okay, so that's them both done now. Pretty happy how that came out. So the next step is to attach the flange to the shoulder here. Okay, so now we'll glue this tube into the axle now. So applying glue to this edge. I put it in first so I don't get glue on the other side when I insert it. So there is a square. And then we'd glue the same on this side. I'm not going to glue it yet until after it's mounted in the chassis, because if this twists, I might be fighting a glue joint as well. So I'll be okay on one side, I'll leave this side free. But we're almost finished. Okay, wow. This was a long one. Well done if you manage to stay the course and watch it all. So this is step 2, and it's supposed to include all 3 axles, the front and the 2 rear ones. As you can see, the length of time it took to do just the one. The hobby bus probably took an hour to cut out. clean up and glue. The hours was, I don't know, 30 hours maybe more, not sure. I'm going to have to start recording just how much hours I put into each part. The Hobby Boss one went together really easily. Surprisingly, unless it's on a different step, but it doesn't appear to include the brake cylinders. The rear one does. Also, again, could be a different step, but there's no tie rod, which we'll explain in this one. And for both of them, there's no steering gear, like a steering box or steering cylinder or linkages or whatever, so it's a bit simplified in that. The paper one, I've left off the tie rod between the two steering hubs because I don't have a suitable size wire at the moment, so that would link them both together. I've also not done the universal joint for the drive shaft at this stage because I'm going to 3D print the actual joint itself. Also, the intent was to do this 3 braces, but I'll do that later, and I'll just use card to go into there. The intent was to stiffen up all these sections here and just round them off, because in real life this is be quite a smooth hump. I might do that for the rears. Everything's taking so long, it's just a case of getting it finished so I can move on. And of course, I've put in more 3D printed nuts for that housing and on the flanges on the end there, and the D-shackle, D-bolt nuts for the underside. Just finishes it off a bit. I think I may be a bit too long, but that's okay. Okay, so got the same to do again for the 2 rear axles. The 1/35th scale looks really small compared to 1/25th. On the chassis, the difference wasn't that great, but certainly for this, it's a really big change.